The Earth is flat. Well, at least in my game. And that's boring, no good, and way too dodge. So, come join me as I transform my game from looking like this to this. Game design is all about creating problems for your players to solve, so that when they do, they can have that sweet dopamine straight in the brain. In City Builders specifically, that problem is most often how to expand, stuff like your economy, population, but also the city itself. In that vein, I decided that the expansion space in Hexburg being limited only by rivers and some small obstacles like trees and marshes wasn't enough. I want my players to also have to take height into consideration, so that they may suffer more. That means that I'll have to once again wrangle with Unity terrain, which can sometimes be a real bitch to work with at runtime, to generate some mountainous goodness. If you ever dove into the procedural generation rabbit hole, you might have heard a lot of talk about noise, with names like Perlin, Simplex and Fractal being thrown around. That's because gradient noises, which all of those things are extremely useful in generating things on the fly. Essentially, if you need to generate an array of random values, like a texture, and don't want values to just go from one extreme to the other, because that looks like shit, gradient noises provide a way to make the random values transition smoothly between each other. How this works exactly is a bunch of math that I won't bore you with in case it causes some unnecessary brain wrinklage. What's important for us is that if we generate such a texture, using for example Perlin noise, and treat the brightness at each point as a height, then we can apply those values to a terrain and BAM! We just made a non-garbage looking approximation of some nice natural hills. Unity has an inbuilt method for generating Perlin noise, but because I want to do some fancier stuff than just basic hills, I decided to use a library called libnoise. Its name kind of sounds like a Fox News description of a democratic convention. It provides a simple way to generate a bunch of different noises and mix and match between them. Setting it up to update an actual Unity terrain is surprisingly simple. It's just this code. This result is already fun on its own, but there's a problem. With this new hilly terrain, if I generate my rivers and streams, they create these massive canyons everywhere. So, the next step is making sure that the height goes down smoothly towards the water shores. To do this, we'll once again use compute shaders. We had a lot of stuff, the river tiles, affecting a lot of other stuff, the terrain heights. So yes, our dear old friend GPU parallelization is back. I explained in some more detail how compute shaders work in a previous devlog, but in essence, if you need to work on textures, like the height map in this case, they're the tool for the job. The plan is simple. Get all the water tiles in the game and smoothly lower the terrain around them to the sea level. And also, for good measure, paint all cliffs that actually have a right to exist with this rock texture. With a bit of finagling, I wrote this compute shader. Now, let's see it in action. We now have cool rock face textures and the cliffs are gone. However, as you might notice, so is the city.
Where is my city?
So, the only things visible right now is the terrain itself and the foliage, which is also a part of the terrain. Up to this point, whenever I needed to place anything in the game, like buildings or people, I just plonked them at y equals 0. I can no longer do that. Fortunately, Unity terrain has a built-in method of sampling height, with some additional finagling because it takes terrain coordinates going from 0 to 1 instead of actual world positions for some reason. I wrote this code that allows me to get the height from anywhere I want. Now I just need to properly align buildings, props, people, roads, icons, this green thing and these other green things. Maybe I should have thought of adding height to the map before all these things were already in the game. In all fairness though, none of these things were particularly hard to place at correct heights, since they all already had some sort of placing logic that I just needed to alter. One interesting case though is the roads, which also needed to have their whole model match the terrain shape. It's not perfect because the road model vertices don't match exactly with the terrain vertices, but good enough for now. I'll either go back to try make the model have a better fit, switch to painting the roads on the terrain, or just cave in and buy easy roads. Now that the terrain isn't totally flat, I can finally show you how it actually affects the gameplay. Going from the start, the roads that appear between the initial town and the map edges now try to find a path of least elevation change, which means they often go alongside the flat bits next to rivers, which I think is pretty neat. Also in map generation, certain ores now have a higher chance to spawn on different elevations. Next up, I gave myself a way to determine acceptable elevation and slope for certain soil types, so for example houses can't be built on slopes that are too steep. That's probably the biggest gameplay impact of all of them, since this is what actually limits player expansion. And that's all for now. One day, after sufficient gray matter loss, I might go back and add some sort of way for players to modify the terrain too, but at that point I'll probably just ditch you into the terrain entirely and write something of my own. Like, comment and subscribe if you want more devlogs, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!